Wonderful. So we are talking today about eating with the brain in mind. We're going to go to the beginning of the slideshow, and we're going to view this as a slideshow. Okay, wonderful. So excellent, and you can still Q&A here. So we're talking today about eating with the brain in mind, and we practiced some mindful eating together. And question for you, how do people usually decide which foods to eat? Yeah, excellent. And so what we're going to look at today is other ways of deciding. And this is what we're talking about by eating with the brain in mind. We're talking about choosing foods that are supportive of brain health and supportive of brain health for the individual who's eating it. Okay, so how do we make these decisions? We're looking at mindfulness. And by the way, because we got started late, we'll go till 8 o'clock. Okay, and it'll be recorded. You can view it tomorrow if you have to go. So mindfulness principles, curiosity, beginner's mind, and no judgment and no right answer. And I cannot emphasize enough how necessary it is to bring these principles when we're talking to food, where we are starting with so much internalized judgment of ourselves and externalized judgment from society about how we need to be. So we're just going to see, trying things and see what we learn. Trusting ourselves as our own best teacher, coach, and guide. You are your own best teacher. And these are some of the things that people who come to me might say. Don't talk to me before I have coffee. Other people get increasingly annoying by the end of the day. Anyone notice this? I work with couples in my work, and so many couples fight in the evening. Now, part of that is, of course, you're fighting then because that's when you see each other. So you have the opportunity. But also, sometimes some couples I've noticed that this is related to how much we were taking care of ourselves during the day and how that affects how we show up in the evening. Anyone having trouble with productivity after lunch, feeling annoyed with your afternoon meetings, or feeling like a slump when you're trying to work on the computer? What about waking up at 4 a.m. with a to-do list, right? So these are some of the things that are relating to how we might nourish our mood through a 24-hour cycle, paying attention and seeing what might help and nourish ourselves during these different moments. So we're going to experiment through eating with the brain in mind to find foods that will be our loyal friends, friends that give you that sense of intimacy, of connection, of trust, like getting a really good hug. This is really essential. The approach here is body positive, size positive, and food positive. It's influenced by a local researcher who's done research called Health at Every Size. We're looking at how most of what we have been told about the correlation between health and weight is not necessarily true. It's important for everybody to have a sense of that their body functions well. There are certain lab markers that can be useful. And often these are not as tied to weight as we have been led to believe. And there are ways that we will really look deeply at this question. And part of the reason this is important is because of its own important corrective to what's in the culture and what's often throughout medical care that's not necessarily true or helpful. And it's important to help calm the nervous system so that we can feel safe enough to learn and feel that we are not going to be judged and told that our bodies need to change. We are not here about that. We are here to take care of our well-being from an emotional perspective. We're focusing and eating on the brain on mind on positive things like happiness, resilience, focus, sexuality, our energy, our emotional stability, and generosity. we're engaging the brain's approach system. So a lot of other teachers who are talking to you about food are going to be talking to you about don't eat this, and don't eat this, and don't eat this. In this class and in this approach, we are talking about foods to add in, foods that we can be abundant about, things that we can go toward. And Tara Brach, who you may know, she's a beautiful mindfulness teacher and psychologist. She says, on any of the deep difficulties, we cannot change ourselves, transform with aversive judgment. Anyone struggling with major addiction, shame, or grief, or anger, you're not going to be able to judge your way out of that. You cannot make yourself change from hating yourself. When we go into self-aversion, when the limbic system hijacks things, it cuts off the frontal cortex, which gives us perspective, which gives us humor, which gives us mindfulness. We get cut off from all of our resources. So this is really central to my approach. There are teachers that will say, take all of your food out of the cabinets and only eat the food that I say. And there are a lot of different things like this that you'll see that are really about removing. In this approach, we go through a long time together, 6 meetings before we start talking about anything that might not be supportive of brain health. And we're much more about going toward certain foods and also really going toward your own loving, trusting heart. We're looking at how the brain and the body are factually a whole system. The gesture that I keep using for nutrition mental health is like giving you physical support, like a hand lifting you up from underneath. So you're still going through the same transformations and changes, contemplations, and personal growth, and you're doing it from a place that's more biologically supported. Joyful, pleasurable, delicious, and varied. And we're looking at feeding the brain first. We're looking at how the brain is 60% fat. The brain uses 20% of the energy that we eat, and we'll be exploring which are some of the foods that might support our brain health. A lot of what we've been told about how fat impacts us health-wise has not been true. It's been really interesting for me to look at contemporary researchers who've been able to get old data sets from people from decades ago and look at their research and say, actually, there's something missing here, or actually the way they explained this was not true. And a lot of this just keeps getting shared again, and so it seems true because it's repeated. So these are some of the principles that we'll be looking at, and looking for foods that research has been shown to help mental health for some people, and then each person gets to have contact with them themselves and see if they're actually helpful to you as an individual. And we're always starting from the principle of love. Here's a principle of generosity. 1 in 5 people in Alameda County rely on the food bank. And when you donate $1, they have a way to buy in bulk and buy $6 of food. So you can donate by going to Alameda Food Bank or your county